Considering Erased was the first anime video that I'd ever done, I felt it was appropriate to finish the job of reviewing it. Yes, Erased, the winter anime that took people by surprise, switching out the usual fanfare of popular anime with a robust cast of likable characters and gut-churning tension. Now that the anime has been completed, there have been some general mixed reaction, ranging from absolute praise to just plain indifference. For me personally, although my opinion has changed a bit from the first Spotlight video, I still think it's one of the best offerings into the medium if you want that nail-biting and tear-jerking experience. But before we get on to the critical part, let's cover some story for those of you who don't know, spoiler-free of course. Since I covered the beginning in my last Spotlight video, I'll be making a quick summary this time. Erased follows the events of Satoru Fujinuma, a 29-year-old manga author with a complacent stance on life itself. Unfortunately, life itself keeps him from getting too complacent, as he has the ability to rewind a fraction of time infinitely until he finds and fixes an oddity that will trigger a disaster. Problem is, he can't control it, so this phenomenon, which he names as a revival, happens at bad times and he gets the short end of the stick. When his mom drops by, things go even worse as another tragedy happens to Satoru and he accidentally triggers another revival. It works, but not exactly the way he expected. It sends him back to his childhood in 1988, weeks before a serial kidnap and murder case happened to a close friend of his and an unknown girl named Kayo Hinazuki. Making the best of it, he seeks out to prevent the deaths of these kids before the worst comes. Now, this is definitely not your typical anime setup. The plot and pace of the show are derivative entirely of its dialogue and setup, rather than extreme action or a sweet pair of jugs. As such, this is a very dialogue-heavy anime. It's a realistic thriller anime to the bitter end, and the pace matches the theme. In almost every case, the situation works out to deliver a tense experience. But there are those cases where those with less patience will become a little restless. These moments are very few and far between though, so it's safe to say that the anime keeps a solid and straight pace throughout, and that's mostly because of the smart direction of adaptation the director took. As most adaptations go, it's imperative that it follows the source material to a safe amount. Erased, unfortunately, is a manga with 44 chapters, each over 30 pages long, so there are bound to be cut sections in a 12-episode run. However, in most areas, Erased's main plot points are beautifully cut and fashioned together so that the conjoining scenes aren't just slapped on and they flow in a smooth manner. For how much it cut and how it all fit into its own experience, I still consider that witchcraft. Unfortunately, it's not all clean, as there are a few pivotal moments left out of the anime for the sake of time constraint, so it's not perfect. The anime is also accurate in its depiction of the manga for the most part, as certain scenes are played literally word for word, but again, some scenes are reworked to omit certain areas of information that the anime won't cover, along with a complete rewrite of a particular interaction between Satoru and another character. But since the anime did well in its own interpretation of latter events, it's hard to stay mad, as both the anime and manga have the same endgame result and epilogue. Part of the gripping feeling to Erase is the fantastic characterization of not only Satoru, but other supporting cast members. There is a bit of realism to these characters, as the anime tackles real-world issues such as an unstable home life and the concept of believing in other people. It also tackles relations between friends and family in a different way, as it's much harder to predict certain interactions between the characters rather than the simplified relationships of common anime today. What I mean is that the cast feels like real people rather than a staple character type, and it makes it all the sadder because not everyone comes out unscathed. It's easy to get swept up into Satoru's ambitions, as the anime makes it easy to root for him simply because you feel real sadness for the people he's trying to protect. Not to mention, this anime has easily one of the best parental figures in a long time. Unfortunately, there are certain character traits that are very minute but extremely important for what the story is trying to tell. It's easy to mistake a moment of indifferent pity for absolute forgiveness if you're half paying attention, which isn't too much of a fault of the story, but can make the story seem a little sloppier than it actually is. I also can't help but feel that this problem wouldn't have been there if this anime had a longer than 12-episode run. But outside of a few moments that can confuse people and a revelation that everyone and their dog saw coming, the characters play an integral and fantastic part in the story. Getting right down to it, this anime is oozing with good direction and overall impressive presentation. I said previously that this anime is one of the better looking slice of life animes that I'd ever seen. While it still mostly holds true, I couldn't help but feel that the animation wavered in later episodes. It was much easier to spot certain shots that hung just a bit too long on a panning environmental shot, and there are a couple more glamour shots as well. Thankfully, it wasn't too distracting, as the scenes are still well animated and cleverly positioned to both avoid similar scene shifts and save on production costs. I also forgot to mention last time how much I love the styles they chose for the adaptation. The film reel concept for Satoru's conceptualization of time structure was a genius move to help people understand, and the designs for the characters are simple and real enough to be both charming but not stick out. Some characters have those sweet lip puffs, but that's mostly because of the original manga style. Speaking of style, just the way this anime is presented really let the director strut his stuff, as any person into color symbolism and focus shots will easily recognize cinematography tricks the anime implements. The use of lighting and colors is just subtle enough that most people won't notice until halfway through, but obvious enough to let people catch on to what the visuals are trying to convey. But it's important to remember that the director doesn't use these tricks to simply expound on a narcissistic hidden meaning. Rather, the subliminal messaging feels less like a representation of character emotions and more of a direct warning to the audience. What I mean is that it feels less like art school fluff and more of a foreshadowing of what's to come, which really drives up the tension if you figure out what will happen moments before it happens. The audio presentation is also beautiful. I mentioned before that the voice acting is well done, although now there are a couple points where Satoru just sounds a bit too disinterested. However, there are also clever tricks done to the audio on a constant basis, especially in the latter half, during and after the climax. It's hard to explain what I'm talking about without spoiling, so I'll just say that even what the characters say are precisely directed to reflect current events. That's vague as all hell, but you'll understand what I mean if you watch it. Something else I grossly understated last time was the music. Composed by the composer for many A1 Productions anime such as Sword Art Online, Yuki Kajiura has a lesser focus on bombastic orchestrations and definitely indulges in music to rack up the tension. Each track is beautiful in its own right and has even been the cause for tears in a couple scenes. Not to mention that every track is a simple variation of the ending song, which really shows the versatility of the song and the composer. So besides a couple glamour shots and disinterested yells, the presentation of Erased is some of the best stuff you'll get. Now, is Erased perfect or for everyone? Absolutely not. There are areas of concern, such as the omission of a certain subplot that is a favorite of many manga readers. The anime can sometimes feel like it's going at the pace of a snail, and there are a couple plot oddities, such as Satoru's inability to operate seatbelt malfunctions. But if you're into the hard grind of slow tension and great characters to boot, Erased is one anime to indulge in. There are quite a few things to enjoy about this anime, and the apparent negatives are far outweighed by its positives. It would be incorrect to say that this is one of the best anime to come out, but it certainly is an anime with some of the best aspects I've seen out of the many to come.